While most of us take conspiracy theories with a pinch of salt, there are some people who are convinced that they're all real, likely because some of these theories have been proven true in the past. But some of these theories have no basis in reality, and yet they're as prevalent as ever. The Great Reset is a call to action recovery initiative that was proposed by the World Economic Forum in 2020, after the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Its purpose was to start the rebuilding of societies that were affected by the pandemic, with sustainable development firmly in mind. When the plan was announced, it was suggested that we would need 3 factors to rebuild these areas. These included green growth, smarter growth, and fairer growth, and many people were immediately on board since they could see the logic behind this kind of thinking. But shortly after the initiative saw the light of day, it fell victim to conspiracy theories, as is often the case with anything that has to do with the government. And 4 years later, it's still a topic of discussion among those theorists. Many people were skeptical about this plan, since the World Economic Forum has been known to raise concerns over certain issues in the world, such as the ever-growing problem of global warming and poverty-stricken areas. But many people feel that it hasn't been proactive in fighting these issues, and rather relies on others to step in. Then there's the fact that it associates with the elite, which has caused many people to distrust the organization. And since a meeting is held in Davos, Switzerland every year in which only political leaders, celebrities, and the super wealthy are invited, it's become a fertile breeding ground for conspiracy theorists. Add to that the fact that this plan was announced in the very midst of a pandemic, and it's easy to see why this theory has gained so much traction over the past 4 years, and why it's still being discussed today. The conspiracy theory claims that this plan is merely a cover for the actual plan, which is to completely eradicate capitalism and to create a single world government that will rule everyone on Earth. Those who believe this to be true are certain that this process is already in motion, and that we'll soon face with some very radical changes, such as having to give up our personal possessions, and that we'll all be forced to be vaccinated, and that the creation of digital identification cards points to something sinister that we aren't aware of. This theory started out on the internet when a few people started expressing their concerns, but soon it started snowballing, and before long, thousands of people had become convinced that we're being lied to, and that all governments of the world are attempting to pull wool over our eyes. This was only exacerbated when some well-known political figures started stating their belief in these theories, causing even more people to become convinced that we're headed for a dystopian future. The global lockdown that was imposed amidst the pandemic caused the theory to grow even further, since many people thought that it was just the beginning of the control that the one-world government would eventually have over us. And while those lockdowns ended years ago, they're still being mentioned whenever the theory is discussed. Many of those who don't believe in this theory point to the fact that conspiracy theorists tend to believe that everything they see and read is somehow connected in a web of deceit, and that their claim has no basis in reality. In 2021, Daniel and Jason Freeman published a book called Overcoming Paranoid and Suspicious Thoughts, a self-help guide using cognitive behavioral techniques. And while doing research, they created a questionnaire that was circulated to members of the public. It contained questions such as, do you believe people are laughing at you? And do you believe someone is plotting against you? Surprisingly, they found that as many as 33% of people have these types of paranoid thoughts on a regular basis, which would explain why so many conspiracy theories exist at any given time. One strange topic that's regularly spoken among conspiracy theorists is that they're possibly being followed by black helicopters, and they believe they belong to the CIA or another government entity. Brian Wilson, the news editor at the Star News, has revealed that he receives many calls every year from people who are convinced that they're being followed by these helicopters for reasons unknown. He often receives photos from some of these complaints, but these images are usually useless, since they're taken on cell phones and are unable to zoom in properly on an object that's high up in the sky. He recalls one particular instance when he received multiple calls from people, stating they saw a black helicopter flying overhead, and that it had a black net suspended underneath it. This immediately made them suspicious, and they wanted to find out what its purpose was. Despite being told that nothing sinister was going on, they insisted on coming up with a few of their own theories. many of which are so outlandish that it's hard to believe that someone would even consider them. One theory was that the net was being used to capture an unknown creature such as Bigfoot, after it was tracked down using the helicopter, and that the creature had been roaming around the area all along. Others believed that a secret underground research facility existed in the area, and that the helicopter was on the lookout to recapture one creature or another that had managed to escape somehow. Even when they were reassured that the helicopter wasn't in any way a part of a conspiracy, and that the net under the helicopter was merely a metal detector that was looking for mineral deposits in the area, many people refused to believe the explanation and continued to speculate that the government was up to no good. As for the other black helicopters that were seen, they were carrying out inspections on energy transmission lines. Helicopters are used for this operation since the lines are suspended in the air, and hence they're more easily reached that way. But this is not the only instance where people have reported black helicopters as suspicious. Some people believe that these aircraft follow them around, but when asked why this would be, they're at a loss for an explanation. More level-headed people have pointed out that if someone was doing nothing wrong and has nothing to hide, the presence of these helicopters shouldn't be a concern. But the rumors have persisted for many years, and will likely do so for a very long time to come. Some commenters have stated that this misconception likely started thanks to movies and TV series in which black helicopters are used by villains and clandestine government groups, though this is just a theory. One can only wonder whether conspiracy theorists would have the same reaction to a helicopter that's painted any color other than black, or if this would just be seen as another helicopter with no nefarious intentions. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill, also known as the Gulf of Mexico oil spill, occurred on the 20th of April 2010, when disaster struck the Deepwater Horizon oil rig that was situated in the Gulf. An explosion was triggered when a buildup of natural gas ignited and tore through a recently installed concrete structure that was meant to serve as a seal for an oil well that would have been used later on. The gas ignited once it traveled up one of the rig's risers, and it caused a massive amount of damage, including the loss of 11 lives. It was later revealed that the concrete structure had been constructed using nitrogen in the mix, which would have caused it to cure faster, but also made it less effective against the massive pressures on the seabed. Mud was pumped into the riser to stop more gas and oil from reaching the surface, but when the rig eventually started listing and capsized 2 days later, oil started spilling out at a rate of about 60,000 barrels every day, and the Gulf was badly affected. An investigation found that a fail-safe device called a blowout preventer, which is supposed to stop oil from leaking out, had failed. Attempts were then made to cover the oil well with a containment dome, but this also failed, and oil continued to leak into the ocean. The next plan to pump mud into the hole also had no effect, and eventually a cap was placed over the well, and this stemmed the flow of oil somewhat, although nearly 5 million barrels of oil had already escaped by this point. Ultimately, concrete was pumped into the well, and it was finally completely sealed up, but the amount of pollution that resulted was staggering. The oil slick stretched over an area of 57,500 square miles, and the cleanup effort would only come to an end in 2014, 4 years after the disaster occurred. But while all of this was happening, conspiracy theorists were having a field day. They suggested that the explosion was by no means an accident, and that the entire incident had been orchestrated. They claimed that this was evidenced by the fact that an oilfield services company called Halliburton had just bought an oil rig fire and blowout containment company weeks before the explosion occurred, and that they would have made massive profits from the disaster. They also claimed that many people knew of the disaster before it occurred, since many investors sold their BP stock shares in the weeks before the explosion happened. One conspiracy theorist named Greg Evanson speculated that as many as 40 million people would be evacuated from the surrounding areas by the government, since the air had become saturated with toxic chemicals used in the cleanup effort, which simply wasn't the case. He also claimed that some people would be enforcing these evacuations, and they weren't actually from the US military, but some kind of human alien hybrid species. Others claimed that while the explosion definitely took place, there was no oil spill, and the military personnel and cleanup crews were actually in the area for some other sinister reason that was only known by a select few. The truth of the matter is that the oil spill was widely reported on by news outlets from around the world for years after the initial incident, and thousands of people witnessed the cleanup operations. But this did little to stem the steady flow of misinformation from conspiracy theorists. Harold Holt was the leader of the Liberal Party and the 17th President of Australia, who served in that role for just 1 year from 1966 to 1967. He's known as the president who took Australia out of the sterling era, which is a time when the country still used sterling silver as its currency. Away from his political career, he was known to have a great passion for the ocean, and he owned properties in Portsea, Queensland, Victoria, and he used to enjoy spearfishing. On the 17th of December, 1967, Holt and a few of his friends were spending a weekend at his Portsea property when they heard that sailor Alec Rose would be passing by Point Nepean whilst attempting to circumnavigate the globe on his own, and the group decided to go to the area to see if they could spot him. Once they were done at Point Nepean, they headed back to Portsea to have lunch, but Holt decided that he wanted to go for a swim in a remote area called Cheviot Beach, since he'd spearfished there many times before, and told his friends that he knew the area extremely well. Hence, they made the detour, but upon their arrival there, they realized that the sea had become very rough, and most declined to enter the water, except for Holt and one of his friends, Alan Stewart. Stewart likely realized how dangerous the water could become, and so decided to stay as close to the beach as he possibly could. But Holt decided to swim out further, and soon he found that he was in trouble. His friends stated that he seemed to get caught up in a rip current, and despite struggling against it for a while, he lost the battle and eventually disappeared beneath the waves, never to be seen again. The search effort that followed is still hailed as one of the largest in the country's history. But despite this, Holt was never found, and the search had to eventually be called off. Holt was declared deceased on the 18th of December, with the official cause of his passing being ruled as an accidental drowning. It was a tragic event in Australia's history, but some conspiracy theorists are adamant that the facts reported in the news were merely a ruse to distract people from the reality of the situation, that Holt was still alive after faking his own passing. Some people felt so strongly about this theory that they started contacting the police to air their suspicions. Making matters worse was a letter written by an American lawyer in which he stated his belief that Holt met his end thanks to carefully orchestrated sabotage, likely by a group from a different country. It was speculated that he'd unknowingly ingested delayed-effect medication that could have been placed in his food or drink while he was on his way to the beach. This would have left him helpless once he'd swum out, and eventually would have caused him to falter in the waves. Others believed that once he was underwater, he was picked up by a submarine and eventually brainwashed into revealing certain government secrets. But due to the extremely rough conditions, it would have been all but impossible to operate a submarine in the area that day. There's even been speculation that he disappeared of his own free will, and that he's living a new life somewhere else, but none of these theories have ever been proven. George Soros is a well-known Hungarian-American billionaire, philanthropist, and businessman with a net worth of around $6.7 billion. He founded the Central European University, which is situated in Budapest, where studies concerning social sciences are carried out. During the Second World War, he and his family managed to survive by hiding the fact that they were Jewish. They managed to secure false identity documents and also helped other Jewish families escape the horrors of that war. Following the end of the war, he relocated to London in 1947, where he worked as a railway porter and a nightclub waiter while studying at the London School of Economics. He eventually moved to the US in 1956, and 20 years later he'd become one of the country's most successful investors ever. He's known to be a firm supporter of the LGBTQ community as he continues to promote the principle of an open society, and he stated that his financial success has allowed him to attempt to create a more equal and just world for everyone. But not everyone is convinced that Soros has the good intentions that he claims to. He's been the subject of numerous conspiracy theories, some of which paint him as a man who only has his own interests at heart. One such theory came about after an article was posted to the conservative political journalism website called the Free Beacon, specifically regarding his donor network, Democracy Donors, and his activities within that network. Further conspiracies have popped up in recent times with the emergence of the QAnon conspiracy theory, which claims that the world will soon be overtaken by a group of elites who worship Satan and who are attempting to control the media as well as the world's politics. One poll conducted in 2020 revealed that as many as 17% of Americans believe this theory, and by all accounts this number seems to be growing, as some politicians and prominent figures have revealed that they're a part of the QAnon movement. Those who subscribe to this theory believe that political leaders such as Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and George Soros are part of the elitist group that will eventually take over the world. They also include certain celebrities in this list, including Tom Hanks, Oprah Winfrey, and Ellen DeGeneres, and even Pope Francis and the Dalai Lama have been named as part of this massive conspiracy. They further allege that the leaders of this group will soon be exposed, arrested, and forced to serve time in prison at Guantanamo Bay, but they've also stated that many of these members will eventually be executed. Other rumors surrounding Soros claim that he sympathized with German forces during the Second World War, despite proof existing that the exact opposite is true. He's also accused of sponsoring certain protests and supporting coups in some countries including Russia, but again, these allegations are made without any evidence. In a bid to stem the flow of theories and harassment, a group of fact-checkers were tasked with either confirming or debunking these claims, but they then became the targets of conspiracy theorists and did their utmost to discredit the findings that Soros isn't some part of some global organization that seeks to take over the world. These fact-checkers were able to disprove the wild theories suggested by conspiracists, but still, the rumors persist. And since it's almost impossible to change the mind of a conspiracy theorist, the chances are these won't be the last allegations made against him. Most of us are aware that there's fluoride in our toothpaste, and that it helps keep our teeth strong by strengthening the hard enamel surface that's exposed to food we eat and the drinks we ingest. But fluoride can also be harmful, but only if it's ingested in large amounts. This usually results in a white, streaky buildup on the teeth, and the leading cause of this is when someone swallows their toothpaste while brushing their teeth rather than washing it down the drain. Used correctly, fluoride has many dental health benefits, but in recent times it's become the focus of a conspiracy theory. And as outlandish as this may sound, millions of people around the world believe that it's part of a nefarious plot. It all started in 1901 when a dentist named Frederick Mackay noticed that some of his patients had strange stains on their teeth, and he made it his mission to find out what was causing it. He eventually discovered that the likely cause was the water supply. In 1931, dentist H.V. Churchill suggested that this staining was being caused by aluminum that was present in the water, since he found several cases of staining in an area near aluminum mines. He then performed tests in several different areas, and came to the realization that communities that had fluoride in their water saw much fewer incidents of staining and tooth decay. This prompted the U.S. Public Health Service to conduct their own studies in 1942, with the help of dentist Dr. H.T. Dean, who was able to confirm that naturally occurring fluoride had a positive effect in areas where it was present in the water supply. This prompted the U.S. government to start adding fluoride to water supplies in areas where it wasn't naturally occurring, the first being Grand Rapids, Michigan, and 6 years later it was found that tooth decay in children living in Grand Rapids was 50% less than those in surrounding communities. Over the next few years, fluoride was added to the water supply of several other towns and cities, and soon it became apparent that it was having a positive effect. Soon, the initiative was adopted in other countries, including the Netherlands, Canada, and New Zealand, and the same results were reported. It was then implemented in some areas in England and Ireland, and today, as many as 40 countries have fluoride in their water, helping people fight tooth decay. But conspiracy theorists believe that this is just another way for the governments of the world to control us. Despite over 3,000 different studies being conducted around the world, and all these reports showing that the most adverse effect of fluoridation was slight staining of the enamel, some people remain adamant that it's causing harm. One conspiracy theory holds that fluoride is being used to brainwash members of the public, or that it somehow makes us more suggestible and hence easier to control. Others have stated that it causes acne, and it's one of the leading causes of Alzheimer's disease, as well as anemia, which is a shortage of hemoglobin. Then there's the theory that areas where fluoridation has been implemented have seen a dramatic drop in people's IQs. Just another way that these governments are supposedly keeping us under their thumbs. While this may sound like a strange belief to most of us, there are thousands of people who believe in the theory, which is evidenced by the fact that 74 different cities have decided to stop fluoridating their water supply. A perpetual motion machine is a device that would change the world forever, since it could be used to create an endless supply of electricity, which could then be used to power households, businesses, electric vehicles, and just about any electric device known to man. But such a device remains elusive. Many scientists have attempted to construct a perpetual motion machine, but the reality is that the gravity works against them, and the only way to keep a device in perpetual motion is to add a power supply, which defeats the entire point of its purpose. Furthermore, an endless supply of energy would mean that electricity would eventually become a free commodity, and because of this, conspiracy theorists believe that such a device may already exist, but that it's being kept from the public so that they keep paying their power bills. But the theory, known as free energy suppression, doesn't focus solely on perpetual motion devices, but also alternative methods of generating electricity that usually involve large oil companies. These theorists have claimed that much cheaper and safer methods of electricity production have existed for a long time, but that oil and power companies would lose an immeasurable amount of profit if these methods were to be implemented in our daily lives. But the theory doesn't end there. It's also been suggested that the governments of the world and certain lobby groups have started weakening renewable energy sources such as biofuel, solar panels, and geothermal devices to force us to use petroleum, diesel, and nuclear-generated electricity instead. The first and probably most popular theory regarding free energy suppression is that it would cause capitalism to completely collapse, since the public wouldn't have to pay for many of the commodities that they're being charged for at present. Then there's the emergence of electric cars. Since free electricity would completely wipe out the need for gasoline and diesel-powered cars in favor of electric vehicles, conspiracy theorists claim that oil companies would be decimated, and hence will not allow this technology to become common knowledge. One man, Stanley Meyer, once stated that he'd invented a way for cars to operate using nothing more than water, but he added that before he could reveal his discovery, he was targeted by what he refers to as dark forces, and he eventually passed away without divulging his secret. Another man, Bob Boyce, also claims to have invented a similar type of water-based fuel, but it's said that he was secretly given cancer-causing agents via a microchip that was implanted in his body, and his method was also never revealed. The theory further claims that we're being forced to use incandescent light bulbs that only last for around 1,000 hours, when bulbs exist that can last as long as 150,000 hours. But it's been pointed out that these bulbs, if they exist, would require a lot more electricity, and hence wouldn't be any more cost-effective. Furthermore, it's said that certain sectors of industry are suppressing the use of the hemp plant to replace cotton, oil, fossil fuels, plastics, and certain building materials, since it's much cheaper to use and would cause many billions of dollars in losses. While it is true that hemp is a very versatile plant that's being used in many different ways, there's no evidence to prove that its use is being suppressed by anyone. Least of all, massive corporations that would come under fire if it was discovered that they were discouraging the use of more sustainable and cost-effective materials. American football is arguably the USA's most popular sport, followed closely by basketball and what many consider to be America's favorite pastime, baseball. Proving just how popular the sport has become, it was estimated that as many as 123 million people watched the Super Bowl in 2024 in America alone, and it still holds the achievement of being the most watched TV program in the country's history. The Dallas Cowboys have the most impressive record when it comes to American football, as they boast an impressive 57.6 winning percentage. But when it comes to the Super Bowl, the Pittsburgh Steelers and New England Patriots sit at the top of the ranks with 6 wins each. When it comes to the best quarterback of all time, many will agree that this accolade belongs to Tom Brady, who spent 20 years of his career with the New England Patriots, a team that's often mentioned in conspiracy theories. These theories likely stemmed from the team's success, since many people feel that the referees who oversee their games, the league office, and even media outlets are part of a rigging system that's geared towards ensuring victory for the team. One way that this is said to be done is that officials decline to call blatant penalties committed by the Patriots, and this of course results in the team winning more games. But this part of the conspiracy goes much deeper. It's been suggested that the league office chooses the specific referees for each Patriot game, and then sends orders to those refs on how the game is supposed to play out. This, according to some, is known to the media, but since they receive better ratings when the Patriots win, they choose to turn a blind eye. While these theories have been around for a long time, they became even more outlandish in 2022, after the Patriots defeated the Jacksonville Jaguars 50-10, securing a postseason berth in the process. When the game ended, one of the referees was seen walking up to Brady and shaking his hand, causing conspiracy theorists to speculate that the referee was part of a scheme to secure Patriots' victory. Adding fuel to this conspiracy fire was the fact that the Patriots were only called for one penalty during the entire game, which caused them to lose just 10 yards. One would think that these theories wouldn't have much of an impact, but some league and team officials have stated that they've started affecting the Patriot team's popularity, though this is yet to be proven. But the best remembered conspiracy theory regarding the New England Patriots is one known as Deflategate, in which it was speculated that the team underinflated the footballs used during the 2014 AFC Championship game against the Indianapolis Colts by as much as 2 pounds, making them easier to handle, throw, and receive. It's said that Tom Brady preferred the grip that he got on softer balls, and since this was an important game, ordered the balls be deflated so that the team could have an advantage over the opposing quarterback. An investigation was launched by the NFL, and it was eventually found that the rumors were likely untrue, though the team was ordered to pay a $1 million fine, and Brady was suspended for 4 games. None of these conspiracy theories have been proven to be true, and yet they're still spoken about often today, and since it involves one of America's most popular sports, they'll be discussed for many years to come. In the world of conspiracy theories, Chem Trails are among the most often mentioned. Hundreds of websites claim to have information on this theory, and over the years, more and more people have become convinced that this is a conspiracy that's taking place in the skies above their heads. To understand chemtrails, one first needs to understand contrails or condensation trails. These are the white trails that are left behind when an airplane flies overhead, and they're caused by vapor that freezes or condenses around an airplane's exhaust. Most of us would have seen these lines in the sky, and while many of us think they're quite beautiful, conspiracy theorists believe they hold a dark secret that's only known by a select few, most notably the governments of the world. The idea of chemtrails started back in 1996, when a research paper from someone in the Air Force emerged. It was entitled Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, and it immediately sent conspiracy theorists' tongues wagging. The paper suggested that a weather modification system could be used by the year 2025, and that this would allow the military to reach some of its objectives with the use of aerospace forces. It further stated that this type of system didn't exist at the time, but that it would be of great use if ever developed. This gave birth to the suggestion that what we see as beautiful streaks in the sky are actually highly toxic chemicals that are being released into the Earth's atmosphere by the government or the world elite, and that this is being done for some nefarious reason. Some believe that these chemtrails are being used to control the minds of the public, making them more suggestible and hence easier to control. They claim that this would be useful to any government, since they would then be free to pass any laws they deemed fit and would encounter very little resistance. Others think that the trails are simply toxic and that they're being used to poison people on the ground, though why this would be done is yet to be explained, since there's no reason for any government to simply poison its own people. Then there's the theory that this is some kind of weather controlling method, as was suggested by the Air Force research paper. While some think this could be done for positive reasons, such as diverting damaging storms, others feel that it could be used to create such damaging conditions during wartime, giving the controlling side a marked advantage. The theory gained further traction in 2021, when Texas experienced a week of cold weather that was called the Deep Freeze. Some social media users started suggesting that this was the work of the American government, And quite unbelievably, a poll found that up to 10% of the population agreed with this suggestion, with at least as many as 30% of Americans believing that it was at least possible. But scientists have conducted numerous studies to prove or disprove the theory, and they found no evidence of any foreign chemicals being present in contrails. Furthermore, many people have pointed out for this scheme to ever work, too many people would have to be made aware of it, and hence it would never remain a secret. And yet the theory persists and has become more prevalent today than it ever has before, despite there being no proof whatsoever that we're being poisoned or controlled by chemicals that are being released into our air. On the 13th of May, 1917, 3 shepherd children, Francisco and Jacinta Marto and Lucia dos Santos, were tending to their sheep in Cova da Iria in Fatima, Portugal, and later returned home to report that they'd seen something very unusual while out in the fields. They stated that they'd been approached by a woman who was surrounded by a bright light that shone as bright as the sun, and after introducing herself as the Lady of the Rosary, she asked them to pray to the Rosary for peace on earth. They would report seeing the same apparition a further 5 times over the next few months, and each time the lady had a message to share, and these have become known as the 3 secrets of Fatima. These secrets were only known to Lucia, since she recorded them in a set of memoirs and only revealed the first 2 in the 1940s. She decided to keep the 3rd secret to herself, and many people believe that this is because it would be too horrific to share. The first of the secrets revealed to the children was a vision of hell that follows the same narrative that's given in the Bible, with souls being tormented in a sea of fire and never-ending dismay. The second secret was revealed to be a prediction of the end of the First World War, but it also warned that it would be followed by another great war, which most people believe was the Second World War. This secret also stated that the people of Russia should convert to Catholicism. The 3rd secret remained with Lucia, but she was asked by the bishop of Laria to write it down, and she agreed. Once it was written down, the secret was sealed away from prying eyes, and it would remain hidden for decades until it was finally unsealed in 2000. This was done on the very day that Francisco and Jacinta were beatified, and the world waited with bated breath to hear the message that they'd speculated over for such a long time. Many people feared that it would reveal something terrible that would happen in the future, and if the secrets are to be believed, they were correct. The message stated that Christians would face persecution in the future, and it made specific mention of a bishop that would be dressed in white and who would suffer some kind of attack. This is believed to refer to the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II, which took place in 1981. The secret had finally been revealed, and while this set many people's minds at ease since all 3 events had already taken place, others remained skeptical since they believed that the 3rd secret was still being kept from them, or that at the very least, some of the document had not been revealed. It's believed that this conspiracy theory came to be thanks to the tame nature of the 3rd secret. Since so many people believed that it contained a message so dire that several popes refused to divulge it, conspiracy theorists claim that the mention of the bishop in white clothing is just a fragment of the message, and that it actually contains horrors that we couldn't possibly fathom. But the Catholic Church hit back at these allegations by stating that the very reason that the secret was revealed was to stop the spread of misinformation, speculation, and conspiracy theories. But it will, however, take a lot more to convince these theorists that the mystery of the 3rd secret has truly been revealed in its entirety. The concept of a 15-minute city is one that looks to promote sustainability and the reduction of carbon emissions. The idea is to have a city laid out in such a way that anyone anywhere in the city can reach any amenity, such as a supermarket, gas station, or hospital, within 15 minutes when traveling on foot or on a bicycle. By living in such an area, fewer people will be using cars, and hence pollution will automatically be reduced, even if many of the residents of the city use public transportation rather than driving their cars. The concept is meant to be a positive one that seeks to make a difference in the world, but not everyone is convinced, as some people think that there's something more untoward going on, and that the government has a hidden agenda when it comes to these cities. Some conspiracy theorists believe that the concept infringes on their personal rights, and that the government is overreaching by suggesting that we use bikes and our feet to get around, instead of sitting in traffic for hours on end. Then there are those who have likened these cities to open-air prisons, as they believe bigger cities will be divided into smaller sections, and that the residents will then need to apply for a permit should they wish to visit an area other than their own. Jordan Peterson, a psychologist from Canada, claims that this is all part of a bigger plan, whereby bureaucrats will eventually control our everyday lives, telling us what we're allowed to drive, when we're allowed to drive it, and which areas we're allowed to visit. Others have suggested that we'll eventually not be allowed to use cars at all, which they see as a massive infringement on their human rights. But the claims get even more bizarre, as unlikely as that may seem. According to some conspiracy theorists, this is a plan to turn everyday neighborhoods into concentration camps, and that if the concept of 15-minute cities ever becomes a reality, our lives will begin to resemble something akin to the movie Hunger Games, since we'll each become a part of our separate sections. There are also concerns that each citizen will have their carbon footprint monitored, and that there will be dire consequences for those who don't follow the rules by the letter. While many people are supportive of the idea, others aren't as optimistic, and protests have been held in England and Canada by those who believe their personal freedom is under attack by their respective governments. It's also been pointed out that people who solely rely on their cars for transportation are living the exact opposite of freedom, since they've become dependent on just one form of transportation that also damages the environment. But the naysayers refuse to relent, as they've even suggested that these smaller areas within cities will become facial recognition zones, likening them to digital surveillance prisons, where your every move will be monitored around the clock. The fact is that you can't please everyone, and while the 15-minute city may seem like a great idea to most people, there will always be at least one person who sees a problem within a solution, and very often there's a conspiracy theory that goes along with it. During his career as the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley amassed one of the biggest fan bases that the world has ever seen, and even today, his music is seen by many as some of the greatest ever recorded. His live concerts were known to whip his fans into a frenzy, and thanks to his popularity, his crooning voice became familiar to most households, as his record sales rocketed and he continued to produce catchy songs that are still played on the radio today. It's no surprise then that when he passed away on the 16th of August, 1977, it had a profound effect on his fans and the music industry as a whole, since he was idolized by millions of people worldwide and had inspired many artists who list Elvis as a major influence on their sound. Those who heard about his passing that day saw it as a great tragedy, but then there are those who believed something untoward was going on. And to this day, there are multiple conspiracy theories about Elvis's passing, one of which claims that he's actually still alive somewhere. These theories didn't take long to sprout up, as people were speculating about his passing as early as the day of his funeral. His death was confirmed by several doctors and a coroner, and yet many people refused to accept these reports as fact. They claimed that he'd grown weary of the music industry and of being constantly hounded by fans, and so he decided to fake his own passing to start a new life somewhere. And some of these claims are ridiculously outlandish. These rumors have been helped along by people who claim to have seen Elvis alive and well, despite knowing that he's one of the most impersonated music stars of all time. This led to the creation of the Elvis Sighting Society, which keeps track of all reported Elvis sightings in an effort to prove that he is still alive. During his life in the spotlight, there were many reports that Elvis had ties to the mob and the Memphis Mafia in particular. This led some people to speculate that he eventually turned against them, and that he then had to fake his own passing to avoid being tracked down by the remaining mobsters. Others claimed to have seen a black helicopter land at his house in the hours before it was announced that he'd passed away. They claimed that this helicopter was there to pick Elvis up, after which it transported him to Bermuda, where he started his new life out of the spotlight. None of these claims have ever been proven, but the conspiracy theories persist. It is possible that some fans grow so fond of their idols that they see them as almost immortal. When they then learn that they've passed away, they find it impossible to accept, and instead decide that there must be something more ominous going on. One such theory suggests that Elvis eventually returned to Graceland, but instead worked there as a groundskeeper, thus being able to remain at his home without all the unwanted attention from fans and the media. No matter the facts that are presented to them, there will always be some people who believe that Elvis is still with us, and that he's somewhere living his new normal life. Performing a quick search on the internet about conspiracy theories will undoubtedly return results that include the sinking of the Titanic. It's one of the most famous nautical disasters of all time, and many people believe that there is more than meets the eye as far as its maiden and only voyage is concerned. Some conspiracy theorists suggest that the third-class passengers who were aboard the ship were locked in their quarters after the ship struck an iceberg, since they would have taken up too much space in the lifeboats, resulting in first and second-class passengers being given priority. But there's no proof to back the claims up. This theory may have spawned thanks to the fact that lifeboats were only available on the first and second-class decks, and hence those passengers would have reached the boats first, and more third-class passengers would have remained trapped aboard. Another theory claims that a first-class passenger named William T. Sloper from Connecticut made it onto a lifeboat by dressing up as a woman, but this is also untrue. The fact is that Sloper initially didn't think the ship was in distress, and so didn't want to get on a lifeboat. He was eventually convinced to get on the very first lifeboat to leave the ship, despite 37 of the seats being empty, and for the rest of his life, he had to deal with these accusations that had no basis in reality. Most of us have heard that the Titanic was touted by its company, White Star Line, as unsinkable. But this description came from media outlets that sensationalized White Star's advertisements for the ship, that called it the largest and finest liner in the world at the time. But there is one lesser-known theory that has gained a lot of traction in recent years, and once again, there's no proof for this theory, and it isn't known who started it or where they got their information from. Some people are convinced that the Titanic would never have gone under if it weren't for one piece of cargo it was carrying: the cursed mummy of an Egyptian princess called Amun-Ra, who was buried on the banks of the Nile River many centuries ago. It's said that her curse hit for the first time in the 1890s, when a well-off English tourist purchased the mummy while visiting Egypt, after he drew lots with his 3 friends and won. He had the coffin brought to his hotel room, but shortly after it was delivered, he was seen by witnesses walking out into the desert, never to be seen again. His 2 friends also soon felt the mummy's wrath, when one lost his arm to an accident involving a firearm, and when the 3rd man eventually returned home to England, he was dismayed to find that he'd lost all of his money, including his savings. The 4th man eventually became homeless after he lost his job and started suffering from bad health. Despite all this misfortune, the mummy was still transported to England, and it became the property of a man who lived in London. But he and his family then became the next victims of the mummy's curse. 3 members of his family were involved in traffic accidents, and his house nearly burned down, prompting him to donate the mummy to the British Museum. Here, the truck transporting it injured one staff member, another was injured while carrying it to its storage area, and another passed away without explanation. Then, once it was in place, people started reporting hearing crying coming from the coffin, and inexplicable events taking place in the museum, and the decision was made to sell it. It eventually made it into the hands of an American archaeologist who arranged to have it shipped to New York aboard the Titanic, and thanks to the mummy's curse, it never made it to its destination. The fact is that there's never been such a mummy in the British Museum, and there certainly wasn't one listed among the Titanic's inventory, and this tale was likely just a figment of the imaginations of 2 men, Douglas Murray and T.W. Stead. The tale likely appealed to people's sense of mystery, and hence it's persisted ever since. While there is an inner section of an Egyptian coffin at the museum, staff had reported that it never brought any bad luck to anyone, and that it never contained a mummy of any kind. The fact remains that the Titanic met its demise after hitting an iceberg that ripped through its hull, resulting in it filling with water, and ultimately slipping below the icy waters, where it still remains today. While the Titanic is known to be one of the biggest sources of conspiracy theories, it doesn't hold a candle compared to the number of theories that exist concerning the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. One of the most famous conspiracy theories suggests that we never made it to the moon in 1969, and that the entire event was faked in a film studio. It's one of the most persistent conspiracy theories of modern times, along with the Flat Earth theory, and claims that Area 51 is being used to house extraterrestrial crafts and beings. To be fair, there's only a small portion of the population that believes in these two theories, since they're seen by most people as outlandish and fanciful. But there is one conspiracy theory that's even stranger: the suggestion that NASA is hiding a megalodon shark from the rest of us. This strange theory came about thanks to a video that was uploaded to TikTok, a platform that has seen many conspiracy theories born and disproven, thanks to the immense user base that it has. A video claims that a man named George Meyer stumbled across a massive cage under the Atlantic Ocean, and he was immediately perplexed. He decided to investigate further, and he was shocked to discover that it contained a 70-foot megalodon shark. From there, the theory only grew, since it's common knowledge that NASA did indeed conduct research in the Atlantic during the 1970s. And as is the case with most government agencies, some people thought that they were being untruthful about the types of research they were conducting. The video goes on to claim that NASA then built the massive cage off the coast of Maryland, and that it can be found in an area called Zone F, despite there being no evidence that such a zone has ever existed. Then, according to the conspiracy theorist, George happened upon the cage after his fishing boat was caught in a storm that moved through the area on the 17th of April 2023, resulting in his boat being swept into the open water. He then put on his scuba gear and investigated the cage, after which he realized that it contained the megalodon. The video also claims that he dove to a depth of 600 feet, something that's only reserved for the most experienced of divers, and that he never reached the bottom of the cage. The video has convinced many people that the megalodon still exists, and that NASA is hiding it from the public, but it never clarifies why NASA would want one of these creatures, and why they would want to keep it a secret from the rest of the world. Keep in mind that diving to a depth of 600 feet would take a long time to accomplish, since the ascent back to the surface would have to be done incrementally, since the diver would have to decompress in stages before surfacing. The suggestion that just anyone could do this is laughable, and yet many people are convinced that it happened, and that NASA is hiding a creature that went extinct a very long time ago. The existence of extraterrestrials is a debate that's been ongoing for many decades, as many people believe our planet is being visited by beings from other planets, while others think that this is a ridiculous theory, and that the Earth is the only planet in the entire universe that can sustain life. Throughout history, people have reported seeing some strange lights in the sky, aerial craft that move at speeds never seen before by humans, and in some cases, they've claimed to have interacted with these beings. Some of these reports state that they were friendly and brought with them a message of hope or a warning that our planet is doomed if we don't change our ways. But some reports aren't as positive. In some instances, these beings are said to be aggressive, and many people have reported being taken against their will onto one of their craft, where they were experimented on before being dumped back onto terra firma without explanation. Whether any of these reports are true or not remains a sensitive subject, since several people have stated that they were left traumatized by their experiences with these creatures, and that their lives have been irrevocably changed thanks to the ridicule that they had to endure after revealing what happened to them. Over the years, many movies and TV series have been released, depicting what it would be like if we were ever visited by aliens who decide to reveal themselves to us. And in most cases, it doesn't end well, as they either attempt to destroy the planet or every living thing on it. But the suggestion that these creatures exist isn't as taboo as it was a few decades ago, as governments have admitted that they've studied the phenomenon, and in some cases found proof that they not only exist, but have visited our planet. Needless to say, the suggestion that extraterrestrial beings will reveal themselves to humanity in just a few years has caused quite a stir online, especially among the UFO community. These claims come from former CIA agent John Ramirez, who now spends his days as a UFO enthusiast, often speaking on podcasts about his time at the CIA and the information that he learned while working at the agency. He claims to have heard official reports that aliens will arrive on Earth in the year 2027, and that the governments of the world will have started preparing people for this monumental event that will change the way we see the universe, our planet, and the way we live our lives. But keep in mind that Ramirez has also claimed to have gotten into a fight with a reptilian humanoid in his house, in an area between his bedroom and living room. He stated that when he woke up the next day, he had scratch marks all over his body. Whether his claims are true remains to be seen, but many people are already convinced that he must be telling the truth, since he worked for the CIA for so many years, and therefore see him as credible. Others feel that his claims have no basis in reality, and while they don't deny the possibility that extraterrestrials exist, they've taken Ramirez's claims with a pinch of salt, since the truth will be revealed when 2027 rolls around. In 1987, David Godfrey discovered that the planet Saturn contained a massive storm on its northern pole, and that it's inexplicably shaped like a hexagon, leaving many people baffled as to what is causing the curious shape. Jeffrey made the discovery by studying flyby images taken by the 1981 Voyager mission, and in 2006, his findings were finally confirmed by the Cassini mission. During that mission, it was also discovered that the planet has a massive vortex at its southern pole, though it isn't hexagonal in shape. The first hexagonal vortex was found to be occurring at low altitude, but in 2023, it was discovered that a high altitude vortex exists above the first one, and that it's also hexagonal, likely because it's being influenced by the lower storm. It is entirely possible that these two vortices are connected, giving the impression that it isn't a storm at all, but a huge tower that reaches up into space from the planet's surface. The hexagon is thought to be the result of a jet stream, but many questions still remain, such as how the vortex was formed in the first place, and how it managed to remain as stable as it has for such a long period. These are all valid questions that may be answered in the future, but according to some conspiracy theorists, these reports don't tell the entire tale. They've suggested that the hexagon is a structure created by extraterrestrial beings, that it's actually an alien spacecraft, that it was placed there by the Illuminati, or that it's where the gates of hell are located. The theory has only grown in stature since it was announced that the seas beneath the planet's surface could contain many different life forms, and this has convinced many people that the spacecraft theory is correct. They've also pointed out that the hexagon isn't always the same color, and that this could be an indication that some kind of extraterrestrial activity is going on within the storm, which is the same size as about 4 Earths. But many conspiracy theorists have suggested that it is no mere storm. They believe the hexagon was created by the Anunnaki, an ancient civilization from Earth that managed to advance their technology at an astonishing rate, and in doing so had unlocked many of the universe's secrets. The Anunnaki are said by some to have been the creators of the human race as we know it today, or that they once left Earth when its gold resources ran out, which of course has never occurred. Since they've also been said to have been involved with black magic, some people believe that the hexagon is actually a hexagram, a symbol that's often associated with the occult and witchcraft. It's been suggested that the Anunnaki created 6 pillars that somehow keep the storm in its current position while it violently rotates, thereby creating the vortex that's been discovered. But it is, of course, impossible to prove that these theories are correct. But the data that's been collected over the last 3 decades suggests that the planet is in the midst of a massive storm, too big for us to properly comprehend, and that it has nothing to do with any ancient civilization or a race of extraterrestrial beings. But some conspiracy theorists still maintain that the truth is being kept from us by the governments of the world, since it would cause untold panic if members of the public ever find out what's really going on Saturn. For more than a century, we've been perplexed by the mystery of the identity of Jack the Ripper, the serial killer who tormented women in London's Whitechapel area in 1888, but his identity remains unknown today. Many people have been accused of the crime, including foreigners who were living in the area at the time, doctors who had expertise in surgical procedures, and even members of the royal family who fell under suspicion at some point. The reality is that we have no solid idea of who he was, and will likely never know with certainty who carried out those heinous crimes. But it's equally as likely that we'll always try to solve the mystery once and for all. There have been plenty of plausible theories in the past, as researchers have found links between certain people and the killer. But there will always be a certain element of ambiguity when it comes to this case, since it happened so long ago, and everyone involved passed away a very long time ago. Thanks to this ongoing research, there's now a new theory that many people believe has uncovered Jack the Ripper's real identity, as the German-English painter Walter Sickert who lived from 1860 to 1942. Sickert was not only known to be an eccentric man with some very unusual habits, but it's also known that he took a marked interest in the Jack the Ripper case while it was being investigated, though this could be said about just about everyone living in England at the time, since the case has made headlines throughout the country and people were eager to find out who the culprit was. At the time, Sickert was renting a room in the area, and he was told by his landlady that she suspected one of her former lodgers who lived in that very room that Sickert was renting may be the killer. This prompted him to create a painting named Jack the Ripper's Bedroom. This was likely misinterpreted by some people as a type of admission, rather than an homage to the Ripper, though some people think he may have been the real culprit's accomplice. The conspiracy theory that Sickert may be the Ripper likely stemmed from the work of author Stephen Knight, who got his information from a man named Joseph Gorman, who claimed to be the illegitimate son of Sickert, though this was proven to be false sometime later. He claimed that Sickert was part of a conspiracy created by the Freemasons, and that he wasn't the one who carried out the crimes, but that he had a great deal to do with them. Another author, Patricia Cornwell, agrees with the theory that Sickert is guilty, but she has even more compelling evidence. It was found that mitochondrial DNA collected from the Dear Boss letter sent to the police by Jack the Ripper was also present on letters by Sickert. She claims that this DNA strain is only present in 1% of the population of England, and hence she thinks it's highly likely that he was responsible for the crimes. But most researchers believe that the Dear Boss letter was in fact sent to the police by Tom Bullen, a journalist who was looking for a sensational story, and hence it could not have been written by either the Ripper or Sickert. Lastly, there's a very good chance that Sickert wasn't even in London during the time that the attacks were carried out. During the summer of 1888, he was in France visiting with some of his relatives, suggesting that he couldn't have been the Ripper after all. Theories about the Ripper's identity will forever remain, since it's one of our most perplexing mysteries that's still widely discussed today, and it will continue to intrigue us for a very long time to come. If you're aware of the strange phenomenon called the Mandela effect, you'll likely have heard about theories regarding the Mona Lisa painting and the suggestion that it somehow changed over the years. But you may not be aware that the same painting is the subject of a conspiracy theory involving a secret code that's said to have been placed in the painting by Leonardo da Vinci himself, specifically in the subject's eyes. This theory doesn't sit well with many people. The painting has been closely studied by experts in the art field over the centuries, and every inch has been scrutinized for the slightest detail that may have gone unnoticed. And so they feel that a code hidden in the painting would have been found long ago. Furthermore, it took nothing more than a magnifying glass to reveal the code, according to the researchers from the National Committee for Cultural Heritage in Italy. The committee's president, Silvano Vincetti, claims that the code can't be seen with the naked eye, but that it becomes visible when magnified. He stated that the subject's left eye contains a series of numbers and letters, including the letters CE or B, but they aren't certain, which is thanks to the age of the painting. In the right eye, they found the letters LV, which they believe could have been placed there by Da Vinci as a reference to his own name. But the painting also contains codes in other sections, according to researchers. The bridge behind the subject was found to contain the numbers 72, though they have admitted that it may actually be the letter L in the number 2. It's one of the most unlikely discoveries ever to be made as far as the Mona Lisa is concerned, especially since it's passed under the eyes of hundreds of experts who would have relished the chance to study it, and hence would have done so comprehensively. Since we have no idea who the woman in the painting is, some people have speculated that this code was left there by Da Vinci as a clue to her identity, but whether this will turn out to be true remains to be seen. It's also been suggested that the code may lead us to discover the date when it was painted, and that it could confirm Da Vinci's interest in spirituality and religion. This is just one new addition to the many questions that remain unanswered about the Mona Lisa and its creator. While many people believe that the woman in the painting is Lisa Gherardini, this has never been proven, and many believe that the S that's been found suggests that she might have been a previous ruler of Milan, since Da Vinci is known to have spent time there between 1482 and 1499, and again between 1506 and 1507. If this is ever found to be true, we may finally learn exactly when the painting was created, But for now, all we can do is speculate until further research is carried out. Many conspiracy theories have their origins on TikTok, which results in these theories spreading like wildfire all around the world. There have been cases of TikTokers who claim to have traveled backward through time, and quite unbelievably, millions of people believe them despite the evidence they present being flimsy at best. Now, a conspiracy theory has emerged that's left historians fuming, since one TikToker has claimed that the ancient civilization of Rome never really existed, and the backlash has resulted in her deleting her main account. Her first claim centered on the well-known Gallus fragment, or the Gallus Papyrus, a poem about Julius Caesar that's written in Latin. In one video, she claims that the writing on the fragment is not actually Latin, but Greek, and that anyone who can't see this must be blind. Upon learning about her claims, Maxwell Paul from the Earlham College in Indiana rebutted, referring to a specific section of the poem that reads Maxima Romani, which is undeniably Latin and certainly not Greek. In another video, she makes the claim that Rome was merely a figment of the Spanish Inquisition's imagination, though it isn't known why she decided to make this specific claim. Even more perplexing is her statement that not a single Roman document is known to exist. This is especially baffling since there's overwhelming evidence of the existence of such documents and tablets, many of which are written in Latin. Luckily, many people immediately took her to task about her claims, with many commenting on her video, which has been viewed as many as 90,000 times before it was removed from the platform, with names of famous Roman documents, and she was quickly ousted as an internet troll. But she remained undeterred, and her next video got even more views than the first. She seemed to backtrack somewhat in this clip and stated that her claims that Rome wasn't real should be seen merely as a metaphor, though this doesn't explain why she claimed no Roman documents exist. She then added that there are large gaps in Rome's archaeological records, and that Greece was actually the political powerhouse of the period, though it's widely known that that honor belonged to the Romans. She caused further outrage by comparing the Roman civilization to either a circus or Disney by today's standards, and remarkably, many people have taken her statements to heart, despite her failure to prove her claims. What is known as fact is that the Gallus fragment was created by Gaius Cornelius, a Roman poet. It's the oldest remaining piece of Latin poetry in existence, dating back to between 30 and 26 BC. She's now been ousted as a conspiracy theorist who does little to no research before making outlandish and clearly false claims. And yet she continues to speak on the subject on some of her smaller, lesser-known channels on TikTok. In one such video, she claims that Hadrian's Wall in northern England isn't actually a wall at all, but a road, and that it can't be proven to be a Roman creation. But it's widely believed that the wall was built by the Roman army under orders of Emperor Hadrian, thanks to Roman documents that reference the wall. Another TikToker called Ty has made waves on the platform in recent times, after he claimed that we switched dimensions in 2020, and many of his 2.4 million followers agree with it, stating that they knew something felt off about that year. He's made many claims of conspiracy theories in the past, mostly posting his videos with the added hashtag #GlitchTalk, where users discuss some of the more inexplicable events that occur around the world. In this particular video, he makes reference to people's claims that 2020 felt strange to them. He acknowledges that this may have been in part due to the COVID-19 pandemic that caused a global lockdown, but adds that time seems to pass differently during that time, which he thinks points to something even more monumental. He then explains that he's caught wind of a theory that our reality entered into an alternate dimension in 2020, and that this was the cause for everyone's discomfort, and the feeling that not everything was as it should be. He made further claims that we then returned to our normal dimension the following year, and attempted to back this up with what he calls evidence, though many people have found his claims laughable. His first piece of evidence concerns New Year's Eve, specifically the New Year's Eve ball drop that occurs in Times Square in New York each year. On this occasion, the ball dropped a minute late, instead of on the stroke of midnight, and he states that this is evidence that time got, in his words, all messed up, thanks to the interdimensional shift that we experienced. He then shared a screenshot of an interaction that he had with a Siri device. When he asked how many days were left until the year 2021, it replied that there were 357 days to go, which of course was incorrect. He says that devices such as these have been left confused by the shift in dimensions, and that they're still under the impression that we were in 2020 rather than 2021 when the incident occurred. But his boldest claim, which has seen the most agreement from his followers, was that the Mandela effect is solid proof of this dimensional shift, and that its effects are still being felt today in the form of false memories. He added that at one point he became obsessed with the idea that the Mandela effect is real, and he started making notes on his phone about things he believed had changed over time. He recalls making a note about the famous Fruit Loops cereal that was suddenly spelled differently, but when he checked that same note again sometime later, he found that it had switched back to the original spelling, and he could think of no explanation other than the Mandela effect being responsible. Many people were taken in by these claims, with some stating that they have no memory of Easter ever taking place in 2020. They believe that this was the result of the interdimensional shift or collision, and that we're now indeed back in our original dimension. Most of these conspiracy theories have no basis in reality and remain just that, theories. But we're sure to see many more in the years to come, and if nothing else, they make for some interesting reading. Keanu Reeves is probably one of the most recognizable faces on the planet, not only because he's played in several iconic movies, but also because many people consider him to be a humble and generous person. His first big breakthrough role came in 1989 when he starred in a movie called Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, in which he and a friend traveled through time in a telephone booth in order to score a passing grade for their history class. The film proved to be hugely successful, and hence spawned two sequels, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey and Bill and Ted Face the Music. Following this early success, he went on to star in many more well-known movies, such as Point Break, the Speed franchise, Constantine, and The Devil's Advocate, to name but a few. Then, in 1999, he truly made a name for himself in the film industry when he starred in The Matrix as the character Neo, an anagram of the word one, since he's often referred to in the films as the One. The Matrix takes place in a world where machines have the upper hand. We as humans believe that we live in a normal world, but it's then revealed that we're all plugged into machines that create the illusion of a real world in our minds. And it's up to Neo and his comrades to uncover the truth while being hunted by agents who will do anything in their power to stop Neo from succeeding. The movie took the world by storm and has since spawned several conspiracy theories in which people claim that we're actually living in a computer simulation, or that machines will take over the world one day. More recently, Reeves saw even more success with the John Wick movie franchise, in which he plays an underworld assassin who's hellbent on revenge against certain criminals who ruined his life after he managed to leave his old ways behind. He's dragged back into the dark world of crime, and a massive amount of destruction ensues as he attempts to fight his way back to freedom. While the Matrix and John Wick franchises are very different, some fans have devised a theory in which they claim the two Reeves characters are the same man, and that John Wick is merely Neo, completing a training program in the Matrix. The fact that Wick seems almost untouchable while single-handedly doing away with scores of enemies lends credence to this theory, along with the fact that the films have a similar atmosphere to that of the Matrix. Another instance that's often referenced is a scene that takes place in the second John Wick film, when Winston, the manager of the Continental Hotel, stops an entire crowd of people in their tracks at will. Then there's the fact that almost everyone in John Wick's New York seems to be an assassin or criminal of some kind. Hence, they seem completely unbothered by the violence and destruction going on around them, much like the non-playable characters in a Matrix simulation. Reeves has also stated that the John Wick director was heavily influenced by the Matrix movies, and he specifically added elements to the Wick franchise that are strongly reminiscent of that series of films. While there's no definitive evidence to prove that the two worlds are one and the same, fans seem to think that the theory makes a lot of sense, and if nothing else, consider it a fun comparison to think about. Number 9. UFOs and extraterrestrial beings are almost always at the forefront of conspiracy theories, since any unexplained event usually has at least a few people claiming it was caused by aliens. Many of these cases have been debunked, since rational explanations have been found, but in the more perplexing instances we're yet to find the cause. One example of this is the construction of the Egyptian pyramids. While we now have a much better idea of how these massive structures were built, there was a time when we had no solid explanation, leading to many conspiracy theories being born. One of the most popular was the suggestion that extraterrestrials visited the area thousands of years ago, and that they had a hand in completing the pyramids. The theory was only helped further along thanks to the discovery of some very strange symbols and images inside the tombs that were uncovered, and on the walls of some archaeologically significant buildings. These same images seem to depict strange disc-shaped craft flying through the sky above Egypt, and in some cases tall, lanky beings dressed in odd clothing. Added to this was the fact that we couldn't figure out how these massive stones were put in place by the ancient Egyptians. And soon, many people started believing that the only logical explanation was that they had help from a technologically advanced race of aliens that decided, for reasons unknown, to lend a hand. It's been suggested that they used their ships or other smaller devices to levitate the rocks and move them into place, or that they provided the builders with certain secrets that have been lost over time. These theories remain popular today, despite the fact that we now have a much better understanding of the construction techniques used in the pyramids' creation. But this is only one ancient alien theory. Others claim that these beings visited Earth in the very distant past, with the aim of creating a superior human species. To do this, they did away with a large portion of the human population, and proceeded to produce the Homo sapiens. But no conspiracy theorist has been able to definitively state why they would choose to do this, since the alien creatures responsible would seemingly have very little to gain from such an endeavor. Number 8. Most people who keep up with current events are aware that global warming is a very real and dangerous threat to the survival of our planet, and in many cases they do their best to reduce their carbon footprint in an effort to make a positive difference. The phenomenon was first discovered in 1938 by a steam engineer called Guy Callendar when he started collecting data from weather stations in different countries. While studying this data, he came to the realization that the Earth's temperature had risen by 0.3 degrees in just 50 years thanks to carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. He further suggested that the gas emissions were the result of industry, but his warnings fell on deaf ears, since scientists found it hard to believe that we could have such a massive impact on an entire planet's atmosphere. Since then, we've learned that Callendar was absolutely correct, and that we are indeed most likely responsible for the rise in global temperatures. But this research has also resulted in several conspiracy theories being born, since not everyone is convinced that global warming really exists. One way in which climate change is being combated is through the use of traffic cameras that limit traffic in heavily congested areas, thereby reducing the amount of harmful gases being produced. But conspiracy theorists believe there's a more nefarious idea behind this plan. They've suggested that it's merely the higher-ups in the world's way of implementing what they call climate lockdowns, which will see us confined to our houses whenever we're told to stay indoors. They also feel that the efforts being made to get commuters to walk to work, rather than driving or taking public transport, could be seen as a type of lockdown that directly affects their freedom to go where they please, in any manner they see fit. Then there's the Chem Trails theory. Some people think that the governments of the world are trying to combat global warming by employing the trails left behind in the sky by planes, but others believe this is just another way of covering up something far more untoward: hidden chemicals that fall to the ground, making us ill and easier to control. While most of us are aware of the logic that rising global temperatures are responsible for some of the strange weather we've been seeing over the past few decades, others feel that global warming is being used as a scapegoat, since they feel that certain governments have the ability to control the weather at will, but use global warming as a cover-up for weather experiments gone awry. Number 7. Searching the internet for cursed objects will deliver many results about supposedly possessed dolls, cursed furniture that was owned by a deranged killer, or even instruments like pianos that play by themselves for reasons unknown. Curses are also synonymous with certain artifacts that have been uncovered in Egypt, though no solid proof has ever been presented that these curses are real. Some people believe that the inexplicable occurrences attributed to these items are mere coincidence, or that those who believe in the curses have overactive imaginations. But one object has many people convinced that the curses are real. The theory centers on the 186-carat Koh-i-Noor diamond, one of the largest in the world. It's believed that it was discovered in India sometime between 1100 and 1300, though it may be much older, since some scholars believe it's referenced in Sanskrit texts that date back to around 400 BC. But most scholars believe it was found in the Golconda mines around 850 years ago. Since then, it's changed hands many times over, and it's said that each of its owners suffered at the hands of a curse that lies on the stone. One Hindu inscription of the diamond reads, "He who owns this diamond will own the world, but will also know all of its misfortunes. Only God or woman can hear it with impunity." Hence, it's said that the curse only affects men, and there are a few instances that seem to prove this claim, as outlandish as that may sound. Throughout its history after its discovery, the diamond has been owned by many powerful men, including rulers of different countries. In some instances, it was lost to enemy forces during ferocious wars, many of which were fought merely to obtain the diamond. The first known recorded instance of the diamond being owned is in 1628, when it belonged to Shah Jahan, the ruler of southern Asia. Jahan decided that he wanted a throne covered in gemstones, and once it was completed, the throne was 4 times more valuable than the entire Taj Mahal. The Kohinoor diamond was one of the stones mounted into the throne, but the country's wealth soon started attracting the attention of Nader Shah, the ruler of Persia. Shah decided to invade Delhi in 1739, resulting in the treasury being pilfered. He removed the diamond from the throne and wore it on an armband, but it wouldn't take long before the supposed curse struck once again. Several horrific battles took place over the next few hundred years, each one resulting in the diamond finding a new owner. In one instance, a king ended up blinding his own son, while in another, a different king, who'd been forcibly removed from his throne, had his life ended by having molten gold poured over his head. Soon, the British East India Company got word of the stone, and once they acquired it through nefarious means, it was displayed at the 1851 Great Exposition in London. Thousands of people flocked to the site to see the diamond, only to find it rather disappointing since it only looked like a piece of glass. This resulted in the stone being cut and polished to enhance its light refraction, and eventually it was added to the crown jewels. Today, the diamond is on display at the Tower of London's Jewel House, though many people feel that it should be returned to India, just in case the curse really does exist. Number 6. The sinking of the Titanic will forever be remembered as one of the worst marine disasters of all time. Thousands of lives were lost when the ship went down on its maiden voyage, and we can only imagine the horrors that the survivors of the tragedy must have witnessed that night in 1912. It also resulted in one of the most famous movies of all time being made, The Titanic, which was directed by James Cameron and released in 1997. It follows the journey of 2 passengers in particular, Jack, who's played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and Rose, played by Kate Winslet. While Jack and Rose are completely fictional characters, they immediately became favorites among fans of the movie, and Jack in particular has had several fan theories suggested, one of which is that he was actually a time traveler. The first piece of proof comes from one of the movie's most iconic scenes, when the couple is standing at the ship's bow. They talk about their future together once they get off the ship, and Jack can be heard saying that they'll ride the roller coaster on Santa Monica Pier. But the only way Jack could have known about that roller coaster is if he was in fact from the future, since the ride was only constructed a full 4 years after the Titanic sank. If this is true though, he would have known that he would never make it to Santa Monica, since he perished during the film's version of the tragedy. The second instance takes place when Jack tells Rose about a time when he went ice fishing on Lake Wissota. Once again, he could not have done this without a time machine, since the lake didn't exist until 5 years after the Titanic went down. At one point in the film, Rose considers ending her own life by jumping off the ship, since she feels trapped by her upcoming marriage and other duties. But Jack manages to convince her to change her mind. While most of us think that he did this because he'd fallen in love, others think he only stopped her to ensure the Titanic's demise. Had Rose jumped, the ship would have had to stop to look for her, and it may have missed the iceberg altogether. This would have altered history, and hence some fans think Jack traveled back in time to ensure the ship sank, thereby ensuring that history played out as it was meant to, and in the end he sacrifices his life to keep things the way they should be. Then there's the debate about his hairstyle. Jack wears his hair with a long fringe that's often falling in front of his eyes, something that would have been very inappropriate for men at the time, and hence he must be from the future. Later on in the movie, Rose tells crew members aboard the ship that she was saved by a man named Jack Dawson, but that he now only exists in her memory, since she doesn't even have a picture of him. Some fans think this too means that there's no record of his existence at the time, since he would not have been born yet. They also feel that the rucksack he can be seen carrying onto the ship is too modern, and that he must have brought it with him back from the future. Many other theories have been put forward to prove that Jack is from the future. One suggests that Jack is part of the Terminator universe, and that he was sent back in time to protect Rose from robot assassins. Another uses the fact that Jack is penniless to prove that he can time travel. It's been suggested that he's actually a wealthy man in his own time, but doesn't have any period-correct currency when he arrives in 1912, and hence has no choice but to play the role of a starving artist in order to complete whichever of these missions he was sent to carry out. Number 5. NASA's Apollo space program saw 11 missions being launched, the final one being Apollo 17, which splashed back down to Earth on the 19th of December 1972. This was the last time that anyone walked on the moon, and it seems that there are no further plans to return in the near future. While many conspiracy theories exist as far as the moon landings are concerned, with some people claiming that they never really even took place, there is another conspiracy theory that claims there was in fact one more moon mission, though the theory likely stems from a movie called Apollo 18, which was released in 2011. It's likely that the theory came to be thanks to the marketing strategy used to promote the movie. To create hype around its release, the production company behind the film decided to market it as a documentary, much like the marketing campaigns for found footage films, such as the Blair Witch Project. The advertising campaign claimed that the film was made up of footage that NASA had kept secret from the public, since the Apollo 18 mission resulted in 2 astronauts aboard losing their lives, after encountering signs of the existence of extraterrestrials on the moon. But the truth is that NASA did fully intend for another Apollo mission to take place, but the project was scrapped when it was found to be too expensive. The film proved to be less than popular with moviegoers, but it seemingly struck a chord with some conspiracy theorists, who believe the mission really did take place. While some pieces of footage from the original Apollo missions were used in the movie, NASA has stated that it's merely a piece of fiction meant for entertainment, and that there's no truth to claims that they're covering up a disastrous mission that revealed the existence of extraterrestrials. Furthermore, they've stated that the launch of a vessel into space isn't something that could be kept secret from the public, even if they wanted to do so. The astronauts on board would have had to tell their families that they were going to the moon, and it would have been impossible to keep that under wraps. But as is so often the case with conspiracy theories, many people feel that that's exactly what NASA would say. They claim that if the footage in the film was real, it would be the perfect opportunity for the government to claim that it was merely being used in a fictional manner, rather than admit that everything shown on screen actually took place. Luckily, most people saw the movie for what it was, a piece of entertainment that created a sense of anxiety by claiming that the footage was real. Unfortunately, this plays right into the hands of conspiracy theorists, who will not be easily convinced that they're reading too much into a piece of Hollywood fiction. Number 4. Few cartoons have as many conspiracy and fan theories attached to them as The Simpsons does. The show has an uncanny ability to predict future events, such as Donald Trump becoming president of the United States, America winning a gold medal in curling at the Winter Olympics, and even the corruption scandal that took place within the ranks of FIFA. But this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to The Simpsons. Many fans have designed theories of their own, some of which center around a specific episode. But one theory goes much further than that, as it claims that Homer has been in a coma for 20 years, and that all of the episodes we see after a certain point take place in his mind. In 1992, an episode of The Simpsons called Homer the Heretic was aired for the first time. Homer decides that he'll be staying home rather than going to church, and when he proceeds to have one of the best days of his life, he vows never to go again. But one Sunday, while he's relaxing on his couch, he falls asleep with a cigar and starts a fire in the house. Homer is saved by his neighbor, Flanders, and his faith is restored. He returns to church the following week but falls asleep and has a dream in which he speaks to God. He asks what the meaning of life is, to which God replies that he'll have to wait until his passing to find out. God then reveals that this will take place in 6 months, so he won't have to wait too long to learn the answer. It will be 6 months later that the episode So It Comes to This, a Simpsons clip show, was released. It contained a clip of Bart pranking Homer with a shaken-up can of beer for April Fool's Day, but the plan backfires and Homer ends up in the hospital. Homer ends up in a coma when the vending machine falls on him at the hospital, and some fans believe he never woke up after this accident. They point to the fact that he was supposed to pass away 6 months after talking to God, but ended up in a coma instead. They've also pointed out that the show's episodes started becoming gradually stranger after Homer fell into a coma. In one episode, Homer's boss has a run-in with the Loch Ness Monster. In another, he becomes an astronaut despite being the worst man for the job. There's also the fact that none of the show's characters have aged a day since it was first aired. This would make sense in Homer's mind since he would have no concept of time passing while he was in a coma, and instead he sees his friends and family as he last saw them. But Al Jean, one of the show's writers, has pointed out that whenever God is depicted in the show, he's drawn with 5 fingers, while the other characters only have 4. A closer look at the Homer the Heretic episode reveals that God in Homer's dream only has 4 fingers, and hence it was just that, a dream. But this doesn't disprove the theory that Homer has been in a coma for 2 decades. While most fans take the theory with a grain of salt as intended, others find it too intriguing to be a mere coincidence, and they continue to hold out hope that the theory will be confirmed by the show's creators one day, though the chances of that ever happening are pretty slim. Number 3. The Bermuda Triangle has been a talking point among believers of the supernatural and conspiracy theorists for many decades, though discussions about the strange events that have taken place there aren't as common nowadays, likely because many, but not all of these cases have been explained. Through the years, many different theories have been suggested to explain the strange disappearances that occurred in the area, including massive waves that sunk ships, extraterrestrials that abducted entire ships, and vortexes that suck planes and their passengers into a different dimension. Some people think that magnetic fields interfere with navigational instruments, that toxic gases rise up from the ocean floor, causing hallucinations aboard ships, or that the US government is somehow involved. These are all rather outlandish claims, but there's one theory that goes a step further. It stemmed from research done by a marine engineer called Pauline Zalitsky and her husband Paul. In 2001, the couple visited the Bermuda Triangle, specifically the coast of Cuba, where they then sent a robotic camera down to a depth of about 2,500 feet. They were shocked to discover a massive structure on the sea floor that they were certain had been constructed of granite. They collected several samples and confirmed that they had found a granite structure, but they were soon faced with more questions than answers. They found that the granite had been polished, which suggested that it was meant to be highly decorative. Furthermore, when they studied the fossils found in some of the samples, they realized that they belonged to creatures that would normally live on land, rather than in the ocean. Many people took this to mean that the granite was used in the construction of buildings in a city that then sank to the bottom of the ocean. Since the area was known to be subjected to earthquakes in the past, it's possible that a city once stood where there's now only water, and that it sank beneath the waves following an earthquake and a subsequent tsunami. Due to the strange events that took place in the Triangle, many people believe that the city under the water is the fabled city of Atlantis, which is said to have been lost to the ocean some time ago. Furthermore, conspiracy theorists claim that the US government has had knowledge of Atlantis' location for many decades, but decided to keep it a secret since they were worried that it may be pilfered by the Russians. One journalist claims that the site was first discovered during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when nuclear submarines happened upon several pyramid-shaped buildings on the seafloor. The government then quickly destroyed all evidence of the discovery, and never revealed the true location of Atlantis. It's said that the pyramids at the site rival those found in Giza for size, and that they were constructed using unimaginably heavy stones. They're also said to contain sphinxes like the ones found in Egypt, and stone structures that resemble Stonehenge. Many people have long considered these sites, Stonehenge and the Giza pyramids, to contain some kind of strange energy, and hence they think that the inexplicable events that took place in the Bermuda Triangle may be directly linked to the city of Atlantis. The legend of Atlantis holds that it was powered by powerful crystals. Conspiracy theorists suggest that if these crystals are still present under the water, they may still be sending out waves of energy that affect ships and planes above, unintentionally sending them to their doom. It's said that one of these crystals is 3 times the size of the Great Giza Pyramid, and that it could easily bring down a plane or cause a ship to get catastrophically lost. But until further research is done at the site, this remains just a theory, and only time will tell if Atlantis is the reason for all those unexplained events at the Bermuda Triangle. Number 2. The Georgia Guidestones have been a source of mystery since their construction in 1980. Located in Elbert County and made out of granite, the monument is known to some as America's Stonehenge, since it bears some resemblance to the original. But instead of being constructed in a circle, as is the case with England's Stonehenge, the Guidestones were built in the shape of an X. Each of the shape's lines point to certain periods of the moon's rotation around Earth, and it also contains some rather strange inscriptions. But even its origins are ambiguous. A man whose real name has never been revealed decided to construct the monument in 1979 on behalf of an unnamed organization. The man stated that some of his ancestors used to live in the area, and hence he chose Elbert County as the spot to have it erected. He insisted that it contains inscriptions that would hopefully guide humanity to an age of reason, and that he hoped that other companies with doubts about our planet's future would add even more stones to the monument, but this never happened. When construction was complete, the stones contained as many as 4,000 words inscribed into granite, and it soon became a landmark of the area, with people traveling from all around the world to see it. But not everybody was happy that it was constructed. Some politicians and residents felt that the strange messages on the stones could have some hidden sinister meaning, and some went as far as to claim that it was a satanic monument that needed to be dismantled and destroyed. One politician even vowed to see the stones destroyed if they were elected, resulting in conspiracy theorists joining in the debate with a few suggestions of their own. Ultimately, the Guidestones were destroyed by an unknown individual who was seen placing an explosive device at the monument in 2022, and the remainder of the stones were demolished since the authorities felt there may be a risk to members of the public. Before their destruction, though, conspiracy theorists claimed that the stones were somehow linked to the COVID-19 pandemic, that it would result in billions of people being eradicated, or that it may somehow be linked to human trafficking. Others have stated that the monuments prove that the Earth is flat rather than round, or that it's actually a monument to the New World Order, a secret organization that's said to run the world from behind closed doors. The latter theory became so prominent that someone took it upon themselves to deface the monument by painting the words "Death to the New World Order" onto it. This is one case in which the conspiracy theorists won. Many residents of the area have been saddened by the loss of the stones, calling their destruction needless and without merit. They've also pointed out that nothing has changed since they were removed, proving that it was just a monument and nothing more. But many people have rejoiced in the fact that the stones are no longer standing, since they now feel safer in the knowledge that they no longer need to worry about their true purpose, or the intentions of people who originally constructed the monument. Number 1. In 1811, Enoch Lincoln obtained a law degree and then proceeded to set up a very successful law firm. He was eventually elected as the Assistant U.S. District Attorney, but in 1818, he decided to try his hand at the world of politics. First, he served as a member of the House of Representatives, and in 1826, he was elected as the 6th governor of Maine. He would be re-elected in the 2 years that followed, and he played a hand in the improvement of educational programs. He also signed a bill named Augusta as the state capital. A state house was built in the city, and he proved to be immensely popular, gaining as many as 90% of the votes during one of his re-elections. During his time in office, he bought a farm in Scarborough, and intended this to be where he would spend his retirement. But in October of 1829, he contracted a cold, and shortly after attending the laying of the cornerstone of the new Capitol building, he passed away. He was buried in a crypt that faced the new building, and to everyone's knowledge, his body remained there for the next 157 years. But in 1986, it was discovered that this was not the case. That year, the decision was made to carry out some restoration work on the crypt, and a group of workers were sent to the site to carry out the task. But to their surprise, when they entered the crypt, they found it empty. Unsurprisingly, the news of his missing remains took people by complete surprise, since there'd never been any signs of the crypt being damaged by pilferers, or that anyone had any reason to remove anything from the crypt. Since there were no clues as to what may have happened to Lincoln's remains, people started to speculate, resulting in many conspiracy theories being born. Some people suggested that his remains were still there, but they'd been buried beneath the crypt rather than inside it, though it isn't known what the purpose of this would have been, since there would have been no reason to hide Lincoln's body. It is known that another crew cleaned the crypt in the 1950s, and it was suggested that they removed the remains and neglected to return them, though this seems very unlikely, since such an oversight would have been easily corrected by simply returning the body to its rightful place. Others thought that his body was simply removed and returned to Massachusetts, which was his original home state, but this likely would have never been done, since it wouldn't have been a reasonable thing to do. It's also been speculated that grave robbers entered the crypt in search of valuables that may have been buried alongside the former governor, but surely they would have taken anything of value without the need to remove his remains. In the years that followed, many more theories were proposed to explain what may have become of Lincoln's body, none of which have been proven. It's as if he was never buried in the crypt in the first place, but we know beyond a doubt that he was. No clues were ever found to identify the person or people responsible for his body being removed, and to this day the case remains a mystery that's likely to never be solved, and all we can do is guess as to what happened to Enoch Lincoln's remains. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.